News Updates is brought to you by
Paint and Win with Plascon. Color your world. Buy paint worth 100k, get a scratch card and SMS the code to 6565 for a chance to win great prizes, including a trip for two to watch Manchester United play. Paint and Win with Plascon. Color your world.
This program is rated PG. It is suitable for children ages 8 and above, but parental guidance is advised as it might contain mild violence and mature situations.
Land is the most basic of all economic resources, fundamental to the form that economic development takes. Its use for agricultural purposes is integral to the production of the means of our subsistence. Its use in an urban context is crucial in shaping how effectively cities function and who gets the principal benefits from urban economic growth. In Uganda, land conflicts are by far the biggest crisis afflicting the country today. Communities have clashed over competing claims to forest land, families have been ripped apart by land wrangles, individuals have spent decades in courts, sometimes in a futile attempt to secure legal ownership of both plots and huge chunks of land. Like all other social problems, there is the economics and the politics of this pervasive problem. The economics of the crisis comes down to the simple fact that Uganda is at its core an agrarian society. By contrast, Uganda's population has grown in bounds in recent decades. Inevitably, pressure has mounted on the limited land, and without transformation into commercial agriculture and with a perennially minuscule industrial sector, there are poor income levels and therefore highly limited valuable assets. The one asset families and communities can count on is land, especially the inherited kind. The 2015 World Bank-aided report titled Promoting Green Urban Development in African Cities, Kampala, Uganda Urban Environmental Profile, estimated that 40% of Kampala's population lives in informal settlements predominantly developed near wetlands throughout the city without basic infrastructure such as water services, storm drainage, sewage treatment and solid waste collection. Climate change is placing further constraints on the government's ability to manage the urban environment, the report says. Storm runoff levels from the heavy rainfall caused by climate change exceed the city's infrastructure capacity, according to the report, exacerbating chronic flooding and the spread of pollution, which is further degrading the natural environment. Starting with last year, 2016, the lands, housing and urban development sector, together with sector development partners, agreed to conduct joint sector reviews as one of the consultative arrangements for implementation of a sector-wide approach to planning and a means to find solutions to the challenges enumerated beforehand. As a follow-up of this arrangement, the second joint sector review has been underway from 25th to 26th of October 2017 at the office of the President of Uganda Conference Hall in Kampala. It's for this purpose of enabling our public to understand the major proceedings of this second joint sector review meeting that we bring you this discussion here on NTV. This discussion is brought to you by the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development in conjunction with Pelham Association and Oxfam. Join us on our NTV social media platforms for a live interaction in this discussion. You are welcome. And thanks our viewers for joining us. I'm Karaga Baldwins. We are coming to you live from the Kampala Serena International Conference Center. Of course, the introduction has given you a panoramic view of what we're going to discuss about, and it's the issue concerning the lands, housing and urban development sector. And with me here in studio, I have a resplendent panel that is going to help us understand what this is all about. And on my extreme left, I have Mr. Oput Richard. He's the Acting Director, Land Management, Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. Richard, you're welcome. Yeah, yes, in the middle next to him is Miss Harriet Mbabazi, Resilient Livelihood Manager, Oxfam, Uganda. You're welcome, Harriet. And right next to me, a great lady indeed in the land, a public servant, Mrs. Dorcas W. Okalani. She's the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. Ms. Okalani, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I hope I'm okay with the pronunciation of your name.
Yes,
I don't want to get in trouble. All right. So let's get straight on to what is going on. You have a sector review. We just need you to help us understand what does the ministry itself do and what is this whole review about?
Okay, I can say every Ministry of Lands also has a mandate. It ensures rational use and sustainable use of our land for effective management, and we want an orderly manner in which we can plan and use our land for socio-economic development. The ministry provides the policy direction, the regulations and standards so that people can use their land properly. Mm-hmm. And so we in the ministry have 3 directorates: the Directorate of Land Management, and the Directorate of Physical Planning, which is and Urban Development, which ensures physical planning for the country, and we have the Department of Housing, which is mandated to ensure that we get adequate and affordable houses, but which are convenient for the public. Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. So what is the sector review about?
The sector review is really about to see what we plan to do in the last joint sector review, what we have attained in the targets we set, the goals we have, and the objectives we have achieved. Where we have failed to achieve, we want to assess the performance and go to those areas where we can fill in gaps and chart a way forward. Mm-hmm. to make sure that we get programs, innovations which are good for sustainable use of land and efficient for socio-economic development.
So you don't sit alone as ministerial officials. You have an assortment and a collection of all the people.
We have all the stakeholders. Actually, all Ugandans are stakeholders. But we have stakeholders who play a vital role. We have the donor, the development partners. They have come to our aid because, you know, some of these things need a lot of budgets. And as GOU provides for us for running of the ministry, we need extra funds. We have gone in to introduce IT systems in our ministry and expand our zonal areas so that we can take the service to the people. So we consult and do a lot of consultation when we are in these joint sector reviews.
Okay, brilliantly explained, and we will come back to that to understand exactly the viability and the output of that. Now, Richard, just there are about 2 issues. No, there's the central government pursuit of changing the constitution to obtain powers to compulsory take over people's land. Of course, you can explain it otherwise in a technical way. And of course, there is the issue that land is a finite and fixed resource, which is increasingly becoming scarce because of conquest from people who have money. As a result, conflicts and disputes between landlords and the squatters have been on a rise. Okay, and there is so many. There is forced evictions, which are main challenges facing the urban poor in contemporary Uganda, in Kampala City, in Jinja, all over. So we need to understand with this JSR. JSR, when I mention a JSR, is Joint Sector Review. How do you intend to address these questions in the country in this setup of this convention?
Okay, thank you, Baldwin. The apparent land questions we are talking about here include acquisition of land for infrastructure projects, increasing land evictions, yes, as you have referred to, and then increasing land disputes and conflicts. Now, under the kind of arrangement we're going through, what we are trying to come up with are strategies which will address some of these issues, because for acquisition of land for government infrastructure projects, we need to inform the public about the challenges which we face when we go about this business of acquiring this land. The high compensation rates which are demanded, stalled government projects as a result of this. So we need to address these issues through really sensitizing the public to know their rights, that's right, but also to know the importance of these government projects and the central role land will play in doing this, freeing up land for government projects. We also intend to inform the public on the intended government review of the laws, policies, and regulations in order to be able to address this issue, in order to ease access, but on a win-win basis. Yeah. Now, regarding the increasing land evictions, basically what we need to inform the public is that they have certain land rights which need to be respected and they need to know them so that they can demand for those land rights. The obligations as well are important as well so that they know what they are supposed to do. But we also need to inform them about other government programs which are aimed at freeing up land where there's been a kind of a conflict between landlords and tenants using the land fund. So freeing up that land for socioeconomic activities, which otherwise would be difficult without doing that. And then also explain to them various other issues regarding the relations we have, just like you referred to before, with our other development partners, our partners in the civil society organizations who are engaged, who will be engaged with us trying to explain these issues. Now, regarding the increasing land disputes, we want to inform the public that we have a land dispute and resolution desk which has been set up in the ministry. This is supposed to be a central coordinating role, if you like, which will have a central coordinating role for managing these disputes. We also would like to inform the public that we have set up a task force to manage one of the more difficult areas, which has been these inter-district boundaries. We formed a task force between our Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, Ministry of Local Government, and Office of the President to be able to manage these disputes which seem to be escalating as well. But we've also put in place a toll-free number which you can call, where you can report any land-related issues in case you need it. So we'll post that number. It is 0800 1000004.
All right.
Simple number to remember.
Yeah, I think at the end, I hope I can remember. I'll need to recite it again because it's very important.
Yes.
Thanks, Richard. Now, Harriet, you are representing this whole consortium of sector stakeholders. You are there as a representative of one of the representatives of the civil society organizations. So what is the relevance of you being there and what do you bring on the table in this entire convention?
Right, thank you. I would like to say, besides calling us civil society organization, I'd like us to broaden it, to call it non-state actors, because it's broader. It includes private sector, NGOs, international NGOs, it includes donors and so many others, intergovernmental bodies and all that. And as non-state actors, our mandate really is to provide the watchdog role, to check also what government is doing, and as a way of holding government to account. But also specifically as non-state actors, we also contribute. We complement government's efforts, specifically the Ministry of Land, Housing and Urban Development. We do quite a lot of work with the grassroots. So this platform of the review provides us an opportunity to share also what we do, to share new knowledge because we do researches, so we come up with new findings. We also have models we implement at the grassroots. So in this forum, we are able to share those experiences. But also we do performance assessment on the ministry itself Particularly for this, we did a performance assessment for financial year 2016 and 17. You know, and we came up with a report which we were able to present today. And so that for us is very critical. And when I talk about research and new knowledge, I would like to make reference to the recent Oxfam report on inequality that we launched very recently in March this year. The report is titled Who is Growing? End Inequality in Uganda.
Yeah, the international report.
Not international report. We have the international report, but also have the Oxfam in Uganda report.
Which indicates that 1% of the world...
That's the international report. Okay, yeah. But we have the Oxfam in Uganda report titled Who is Growing? End Inequality in Uganda. And one of the key drivers of inequality that we identified was land insecurity. So land insecurity is actually contributing to inequalities in Uganda and extreme poverty. So for us, that provides us a mandate to look at, to deal with issues of land, housing and urban development, and to of course work in collaboration with the ministry, because we can't do it alone. Also government cannot do it alone, and that's why as non-state actors, we need to join hands with government and work together and ensure that we are actually contributing to the vision that as Uganda we set out to achieve Vision 2040 of transforming our society from a peasant to a modern and transformed society, and of course the middle income status by 2020. So for us that is very critical, and looking at the whole issue of inequality and poverty is very central to us as non-state actors, and I think that's what we should all aim at, reducing those inequalities, reducing injustices on land, because land as a subsector within the ministry is very central, and all the other sectors actually, agriculture, mineral and energy, transport, tourism, all rely on land. So land is very critical, and when we talk about housing, houses are built on land. When we talk about urbanization and cities, cropping up everywhere, they're on land. So land, housing, and urban development is very, very central. Okay. And if we want to move this country forward, we must really put focus on this sector. Okay, yeah.
It's understood. The partnership is strong, and it seems you're in line, you're in sync with government. Now, Madame Dorcas Okalani, I'm going to come back to you after this short break. I need you to enumerate to us accomplishments that have been done in reflection to either the recommendations and challenges that have been identified in the first joint sector review sitting, all right? Okay. And thanks our viewers. Please go on our social media pages on Facebook and Twitter. We've posted there a certain discussion lead so that you can contribute, and I will be citing some of your comments as we get along on this discussion. And I'll be back after this short break.
Satu November twesana yakwenange Checho kusirinja mitwale bini mitwale tano VIP Chando on the rugby grounds Lugogo atengeranganya November Trans Africa Jinja kusinya mitwale kumu atenga 5 November Resort Beach Entebbe kusinya mitwale kumu zoka ticket zitu ndimo kubanga bini mitano Oktober 2017 ku MTN Service Centers ku Kampala Road Lugogo Shoprite the Shoprite Clock Tower Radio and Whistle 10th anniversary paka tiki kidwa saba furubala munewa kidwa Radio 1 Cola ata security chikome Uganda Police MTN everywhere you go Bellaga omwenge tegukirizibwa bali wasi w'emyaka 18 omwenge gunywe n'obuvunanyizibwa
Coca-Cola tubabeewuuba nga beekulungula wansi ate era ne batandika okwavula Pampers Benete etendewalirwa era n'esumulukuka kati wano kiba kiseera kya Pampers Kapali ebatuukira ddala obulungi nyangu nnyo okubambaza ne bwe batambula ebatuukira ddala era bamala essaawa nga 12 nga bakalu bwe batandika okwavula kimanyire nga wonti kiseera kya Pampers Kapali.
Presents
Night Live with Uganda's legendary Africo Band. Featuring the great Mr. Semakula on Friday, the 27th of October for only 50,000 shillings. Powered by NTV Radio 1. Governor, whatever your mood, we've got the color. And Johnny Walker. Alcohol is not for sale to persons under the age of 18. Please drink responsibly.
Moro district. It's a district where the communities largely depend on agriculture, about 98%. And Amuro has very fertile land. And its smallholder farmers can very ably come out of poverty through agriculture if the land tenure issues are resolved.
The demand for certificates of customer ownership incidentally first started from Amuru in 2007 when still again civil society organizations together with the district demanded from the ministry that we actually issue this documentation.
There are lots of issues in Amuru to do with land governance and administration. There are lots of land conflicts.
So we need to go to the bottom line to find out what is the actual truth before we can continue with the interventions.
I think if we begin to view these women as people who are contributors to development in our country, it will be very important. Because statistics just show that about 80% of these women are the ones in the real productive work, especially in agriculture. But we don't give them the voice to tell the productive work. All we want to do is to run to the other man who has a vast farm and is doing a lot of work. That is at a commercial level. But at the subsistence level, who is doing the greater work and who is feeding this nation?
This is NTV. I'm Karagao Bodwins. Thanks for joining us again as we discuss the sector of lands, housing and urban development and the meeting that is going on to make sure that they find solutions to the challenges that face the sector. And with me on set, I have Mrs. Dorcas W. Okalani. She's the Permanent Secretary to that ministry. Mr. Oput Richard, the Acting Director, Land Management, Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, and Miss Harriet Babazi, who is the Resilient Livelihood Manager, Oxfam. And as a follow-up now, Mrs. Dorcas, there is when I run through the report that was done about the first JSR, it enumerated a number of challenges, and one of them was problems caused by archaic policies about especially the land, major performance challenges in the land subsector. It indicated there were problems caused by archaic policies, laws and regulations. There was inadequate mapping capacity, there was inadequate skilled professional staff, and many other challenges, not even only about the land sector, of course including housing and urbanization of that particular sector review. So how have you addressed, what accomplishments do you have at hand that have addressed these challenges that were cited then? About three, maybe, accomplishments.
Okay, we have accomplished a lot, but I'll talk about a few, among others. Recently, we launched the second phase of the Land Information System rollout in the districts of Rira, Masindi, Chivale, and Fort Portal. Now, you don't require to come to Kampala as it was in the past to get a land title. You go to those offices and you get your land title within, if you have all the documentation, within a period of 5 to 10 days, you'll have your title. So that means security on your land so that you can produce and you are contented. We also have developed, we have a national urban policy which has now been approved by Cabinet, and that is the one we are going to follow to implement urbanization. As you're aware, many growth centers are coming up, but we didn't have a policy. Now that it has been approved, we are now going to implement the urban policy so that we have an orderly urban setting. You know, many people are moving from the countryside to town, and they move with what they had in the rural area. So we have to organize them in an orderly manner. Another thing we have done is we have developed guidelines for compensation of people we are getting land from. We are buying land for corridors, utility corridors, roads, railways. We have developed guidelines and they have been approved, and those are the ones we are using for compensation and valuation. We have also entered into the housing sector, and right now we are consulting and discussing with Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs. They want to build 30,000 houses, and we want to guide them, we give them the standards of how to build those houses.
30,000 houses for who?
For the army.
Okay.
And we are saying you have to build certain standards of houses which are adequate but also comfortable for the users. And we have also started what I call the major thing, the National Physical Development Plan, because we have to guide both in the urban and the rural areas the land use. That's why we are involving all stakeholders in this, NPA, KCCA, Ministry of Agriculture, so that we have land use, and land use which will be profitable and economical enough for us to move from to rise to the middle income status, but also to have a prosperous Uganda in 30 years' time, so that we are organized and we can be able to cite
that
whatever.
That would be actually 20 years' time if you're talking about 2040.
2040,
yes,
okay.
So
When we started, it was 30 years, but now it is 20 years, but we want to have an organized country. Like when you travel out, you see people having an organized country. We want Uganda to go there. After all, we are the pearl of Africa.
True. Yeah, of course, there's too much interlocution I can bring in to show that might not be viable, because actually it's mostly the government bureaucrats and the corporate people who are rich that distort the actual organization of the city. But that is not part of the discussion. Let me go to Richard. So what just a little bit of the focus on this particular JSR. What are the objectives and what is the theme?
The theme is built around the role of the lands, housing and urban development sector in the economy, and it is sustainable socio-economic transformation through planned use, tenure security and housing for all. That's what the theme is. And this follows on from the one which was set last year on a journey to a middle income economy, the role of the lands, housing and urban development sector. We're following up from that one. Yes. Now, in respect of the objectives, the main objective of this is to identify and develop practical sector-coordinated approaches towards a sustainable socio-economic society through improved service delivery. And the specific objectives, because this has got to be really along the mandate of the lands, housing and urban development sector, identify and agree on the priorities for the new financial year 2018-19. We also would propose strategies to improve the performance of the lands, housing and urban development sector, and then create a common understanding of the roles and responsibilities of this sector to the economy as a whole. Yes, please.
Okay. Is there anything that you're running as a follow-up of the previous review that is incorporated in this current one that hadn't been accomplished based on what you have observed? What is the review that has been done for so far what was agreed upon on the previous
one? Okay, just like the PS mentioned, in terms of the structure of the joint sector review itself, one of the major things we went through was checking on what we had achieved based on the targets.
Objectives of the joint
based
sector
on
review.
Yes, that's right. Based on the targets we had set last joint sector review. The way it turns out so far is that we haven't done too badly. I know that, like she was saying, lots of work has been done, but some of it has not been reported. Yeah, so there is that is kind of a challenge we've got to be able to manage. But the other thing which was coming out quite clearly is that yes, land is very central to the economy of our country, to the socio-economic transformation we want to achieve. But concerted efforts, bold steps need to be taken to ensure that realization of its contribution is really achieved through those strategies we're going to set this time.
Thank you, Richard. And I hope we will be able to build progress rather than to always go back in regurgitating the same problems without having progress in that. Now, Harriet, in the very previous joint sector review report that was done, it was indicated that Uganda's urbanization rate was 14.3% in the financial year 2008-2009 to 15.77% in financial year 2015-2016. Projected to reach 17% by the year 2020-2021. Pretty a slow urbanization rate. So I need you to, as a civil society kind of perspective, or people who are partners in this whole thing, we need to understand what can be the mitigating factors, especially on this issue of the rural-urban exodus problem. You know, where people keep on flooding and flocking right from their rural settings into the urban sector, and you know the chaos that is caused and the burden that is weighed on the city areas.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. To begin with, first of all, our population growth rate is at 3% per annum. And the urban growth rate is at 5.2% per annum. That's as per UBO's statistical abstract of 2016. So let me make that, because
apparently we are 4 million, rather 40 million plus. That is based on the World Population, United Nations Population Fund. And so if you're saying we're growing at 3%, that means we will increase by about 300,000 people in 1 year. That's the implication of 3%.
Sure, and actually it's projected that by 2040, when we anticipate to achieve our vision of 2040, our population will be about 50 million, and 28% will be actually living in urban areas. So that tells you the magnitude of the problem that we actually need to address very urgently. So, and that comes with challenges in terms of housing. Currently, we have a housing deficit of 2.4 million housing units in the whole country, both rural and urban. And besides that, the shelters that we have are below standard. The quality is bad. And so very practical, look at where we are living now in Kampala City. I mean, Kampala City was designed so many years ago for about 300,000 people. And right now, how many are they?
Over 3 million.
Exactly. The roads are not expanding, and that justifies the traffic jam we always have. It justifies why whenever we have even a small drizzle, there is a heavy traffic, but also the flooding, so the drainage system, and so there are many issues, and of course issues of utilities. You know. So
what do you advise that, as this, of course, in this whole assembly of stakeholders, what is your advice that should be able to give a solution to this issue?
Well, my advice is also touched upon by the PS. The issue of already there is a policy. It's a new policy. It's not yet launched. The National Urban Policy. It will be launched very soon, as I'm told. There is also the National Land Policy. There's also the National Housing Policy, which was launched very recently. So those three policies should provide us a framework in which to operate. But also, as the PS mentioned, they are thinking about the National Physical Development Plan. Yeah. So those should be the guiding frameworks, and I think
so that implies that actually you are agreeing with them, they're on the right track.
We are agreeing with them. I mean, we must have the policy and legal framework to start with. Yes. But my only concern would be the implementation, because we all know Uganda has very beautiful policies and laws, and actually other countries come and pick our policies, they go and implement, and they surpass us, you know. So the issue is implementation, but also the issue is about the citizens' voice. Are the citizens' voices embedded in these policies and laws? Do they actually know about these policies? Do they know what the government is planning for them? I think that's where the gap is. And disseminating what is in these documents. They are very beautiful documents, but do they know about them? No, they do not. It's just with a few of us. And actually, even me, I just got to learn about some of these other policies and drafts that the ministry has over, I think, 10 or 15 policies and laws. And they're actually thinking about enacting more policies and laws. And yet, even the ones that are there, the implementation is still lacking.
Okay.
So I think that's the point. And in terms of housing,
yes, just say 30 seconds, please.
Okay, sure. In terms of course, so many issues have been discussed in the review from yesterday even today. Solutions like condominium housing could provide a solution.
That is making like a housing village, and then
exactly, yes, a housing village, and I think we also need to change the way we do things. For example, I'll give just a short example of Umema and their poles, these poles that keep going up. I mean, we should start thinking about having underground, you know, electric cables. We should start thinking
absolutely,
about.
So
those are yes. Having
that sounds extremely pragmatic, and one of the distinct proposals. Just because of some stringency on time, let me go for a break, and we discussed just shortly, especially Madam Permanent Secretary, about Vision 2040. Of course, in a very short time, to get us into a loop of how you are advancing the cause of the Vision 2040. And thanks to our viewers, and if your ministry out there you're watching, you can hear the outcry. There are so many things you're doing, but they're not known. Please come to NTV. We will give you a platform to make sure that this is done. Any department, any ministry and agency out there, please, I'll come back just after a short while.
Did You Know is brought to you by National Drug Authority. Food or dietary supplements are not drugs, and patients are therefore advised to always complete their medicine dosage as advised by medical workers. National Drug Authority cautions patients and caretakers not to abandon their medication as prescribed by medical professionals in preference for food or dietary supplements. Did You Know was brought to you by National Drug Authority.
On the next episode of Coke Studio Africa, Lydia Jasmine from Uganda creates an original hit with Liloka from Mozambique. Avril from Kenya collaborates with Ezo Business from Tanzania on an awesome throwback track. And Rising Stars, the band Becca from Kenya, get the chance to work with AKA from SA and Olamide from Nigeria. Only on Coke Studio Africa. This is where music meets.
And thanks for continuing your company with us here at NTV. I'm Karaga Bodwins. And on Facebook, we posted a question about how do we resolve this issue of land and the housing deficiencies that we have. And I've got feedback from Chichoncho Bosco. He says that they should stop foreigners and refugees from entering Uganda. Actually, we're going to talk about that in a short while. Because most expensive buildings and plots are owned by those who came as refugees and foreigners who claimed to have come for business. I hope ministry officials, you're hearing this, Madam Permanent Secretary. And then just two more. Richard Bahumwire says the government should prioritize urban housing and encourage public-private partnerships, but first fight corruption in the lands and housing ministry. Then I have Anyanzo Setimo. He says that they should restrict people from entering and selling land in urban centers, especially for the foreigners. Okay, of course, we're going to come to that issue, the controversy about the foreigners coming and take land. But, Madam Permanent Secretary, so help us. You know, Vision 2040 has an aspiration, has aspirations, a plethora of them. And aspiration 226 says that our vision over the vision period, 4 additional regional cities will be established, namely Gulu, Mbale, Mbara, and Arua. And in addition, other strategic cities will include Hoima, Oil, which will be the oil haven, oil city, then Nakasongola, which will be the industrial city, Fort Portal, which will be the tourism city, Moroto, mining city, and Jinja, industrial city. Then, Vision 2040 aspiration 234 states that government will, as much as possible, ensure that land acquisition is driven purely by market forces. And if you hear that statement, market forces, yet there's a proposition for compulsory acquisition of land, it sounds a contradiction. So we need you to help us understand the progress made by this sector towards the progressive realization of this vision, Uganda National Vision 2040.
Yeah, Vision 2040 aims at making Uganda a prosperous nation by in 20 years' time.
Yes,
not 30.
Yes, absolutely. And I've given you some of the aspirations which are there, because the listing of actually the aspirations or the expectations are numbered. So I hope you don't forget what I've quoted.
Yes, I know you've quoted the cities which are coming into being, and other cities which are industrial cities.
Are they actually coming over?
They are going to come over, and we are planning to. That's why I told you in the beginning that we are developing a national physical development plan.
Yes, and I've actually discussed it here
and we have been doing it in conjunction with all the stakeholders, including NPA, and we are planning for cities to come into being, but in a planned manner, so that we don't get cities which are slumized.
Yes.
So we are doing it, and we are looking at if our development partners, the government of Uganda comes in, and we develop a whole physical plan for this country.
Yes.
We are right now consulting. We will be able to develop better cities, and they will come into being. And your second question was
about the issue of land, because the vision, the aspiration 234 states that government will, as much as possible, ensure that land acquisition is driven purely by market forces. But there is a certain kind of policy amendment that is actually a constitutional amendment, which would be contradictory to this particular provision, the aspiration embedded in Vision 2040.
No, that law which is coming into being is not doing away with the market prices. It is to enforce those market prices, because in the Constitution there is nothing which is changing, because people in the Constitution, Article 26 says that people should. When government wants to acquire land for public use, the people should be compensated adequately, fairly, and timely, so that they can leave land for public development. In our valuation guidelines, it is properly given that we should use market prices, and we value everything on the land. So there is no contradiction. It's a matter of sensitizing the people to understand the law which is coming into being. So. When these cities are coming into being, of course, the government will acquire some land from the rural areas to make the cities look what we want them to look. So we will compensate the people accordingly. So people should not be scared. This development of cities is going to drive our socio-economic development, because you are aware that 60% of the contribution to the GDP comes from the urbanized areas. So we are not going to take land without adequately compensating the owners. And the land tenure system is very clear in our country. Some people own land using Milo, some freehold, some customary. They are going to be compensated adequately at market prices.
A good solacing message indeed, and comforting to the population. I hope in practice people will experience that.
Yeah.
And you're not a politician. For you, a technocrat, permanent secretary. So
because we use our technical department's evaluation, we go and survey what we want to buy, and then we give it a value. And if we don't agree on it, then we'll go
to the courts.
No. We can even negotiate with the owner so that we get land.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Dorcas. Now, Richard, just as a follow-up on what Harriet was earlier talking about, the issue of housing. actually, as she was quoting, Habitat International produced a Uganda report in 2014 and says that the country was faced with a housing backlog of 1.6 million units. 13% of those, they're dominantly in the urban settings. So we need to understand how the sector is addressing the housing deficiency challenges. She was talking about the problem itself, but I was seeking to know, except at the point where she told me that women should make sure that they embed the wires underneath so that we stop having this pause. So what is the sector helping out to address the housing deficiency and the housing problem in Uganda?
Yes, the sector at policy level took bold steps towards addressing this through the development of a national housing policy, which was approved recently, like Harriet said, which provides a framework for housing development. This policy has got a number of strategies for addressing this housing deficiency. One of them is private-public partnership. And in a bid to do this, we have engaged, for example, Uganda Land Owners Association, engaged with them to offer land to developers and go into partnership with private companies to put up housing. We are also promoting housing cooperatives, and in this case, they are actually right now, as I talk, I think we've developed, we've promoted 8 different housing cooperatives, one in Wakiso, there is one in Mukono. There are various of them, about 8 for now, but this is growing. We're promoting this just to help address this housing deficiency. We're also looking at the ministry engaging international financing institutions, but with a specific interest in this area, in order also to address this very issue here. And there are institutions and ministries, departments and agencies were engaging. National Housing and Construction Company to construct low housing houses, and then also National Social Security Fund in a bid to try and reduce that housing deficit. We're also engaging other ministries, departments and agencies like Ministry of Defense, like the PSA, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Education, basically to be able to put up institutional and employer houses, which is an area which is quite difficult to manage at the moment. But also we are discussing with Minister of Finance to come up with a Uganda mortgage refinance company. These kind of companies have already started in some areas, like in Tanzania, our neighbor here, and in Nigeria as well. The idea being here is to provide long-term housing finance, but also one of the most two individuals. Okay. This is 2 individuals, and also to big companies which can then be able to sell at affordable rates. Okay. Yeah, the other thing, one more, we are engaging financial institutions to reduce on the interest rate on mortgages to support Ugandans so that they can borrow and build homes.
Like what interest rate?
Affordable. We are engaging them.
The banks are asking 25% of it, which is
yes, but we are negotiating now.
Ridiculous. Okay,
yes.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, pretty progressive. Please make sure you implement those things.
Maybe to supplement him.
Yes, just 1 minute.
And when we go PPP or investors coming in, we are going also to sensitize the people who are going to occupy houses that land does not expand. So we are trying to develop standards of houses where we can have high-rise houses, especially for corporate people like you.
Yes.
So that we can stay together but with all the amenities in an area of land.
Okay.
So that we can be able to house as many people as possible.
Thank you, Madam Permanent Secretary. So, Harriet, this sounds like a pipe dream, whatever you as a sector are really thinking about, decongesting the city, housing. There's too much pressure globally. We are now in the era of globalization, and we are regionalized. Yeah, Kenyans have free entry to this place, Rwandese, Burundian, and we have also a refugee influx. You've had the response from our online platform. How practical are all these particular issues, and how do we cushion ourselves from getting the inflictions that come with these sorts of trends?
Well, first of all, in terms of refugees, Uganda will have about 2 million refugees. You know, in all corners of the country, there are refugees. But besides the refugees that come from other countries to seek refuge here, we also have actually internally displaced people, quite many, that are displaced as a result of climate change effects. You had of Bududa landslides, you had of Bundibujo landslides, the floods in Kasese. People are displaced.
That's actually land evictions.
Exactly, land evictions. Recently we had the gold miners in Mubende evicted because of the oil and gas in Hoima. People were evicted. And where are they taken? You know, all that is inflicting on land. You know, the pressure is exerted on land. So where they are going, there is pressure on land. And of course, it's also affecting agricultural productivity. Now, the issue of refugees and internally displaced persons is a problem on its own. Now, looking at regionalization within East Africa, infrastructure development in Uganda, actually we have the poorest infrastructure in Uganda compared to Kenya and Tanzania, the old East Africa.
Even Rwanda, of course.
Rwanda of course, is small, but yeah. So that tells you our infrastructure is poor. That means we cannot be competitive, you know. So in 1 minute, Harriet, what do you recommend? Well, I wanted to first give you the context, you know. Unfortunately, Harriet, yes. Okay, now there's the issue of the large-scale land-based investment is another one. You talked about globalization, large-scale land-based investments, where we have, of course, government, public, but also private investors. You know, for example, Madivani wanting to take over land in Amuru for large-scale agriculture, sugarcane growing. That's called large-scale land-based investment. That is actually very, very, you know, common now. We have investors coming in and wanting huge chunks of land. And what happens to the locals, you know? So agriculture is being affected. 80% of our population is engaged in agriculture, but the agricultural output per hectare is very, very low in Uganda compared to Tanzania and Kenya again, you know. So what we really need to do is, again, the legal frameworks. We are talking about private-public partnerships, but this private sector needs to be regulated as well. We must have... Actually,
there's a Public-Private Partnership Act.
Exactly.
So the regulation the regulation is not there, but there's an act. The regulation is yet to
so we need regulations again. Now, the issue of acquisition of land for large-scale land-based investments, that process needs to be transparent and very clear. We need to have what we call free and prior informed consent. Communities need to consent. They need to know prior to the investment that this is the investment coming in your area. They need to consent to it because land, these people, it's their heritage. They were born on that land. You can't just go and take it away. And that's why we're having these conflicts on land, you know. It's their heritage. It's where they grew up, you know, and it's their livelihood. Where do you expect them to get food from? Where do you expect them to get a shelter? So the issue of, you asked about the land amendment, Article 26. For us as civil society, we feel like that is not called for because the Constitution is very clear. I think it's Article 237. It provides for land belongs to people. I mean, let me finish just a second. So the Constitution is clear, the laws are very clear. So for us as civil society, what we are asking for is the passing of the land acquisition, compensation and rehabilitation policy. But not the amendment of Article 26.
Good thing she's hearing, and I believe your bosses in the entire system are here. Dorcas, just in 30 seconds, your concluding remarks, the future of this sector.
The future of the sector. We intend to, with all our policies and regulation and laws which are coming in place, the national land policy, the national urban policy, the land acquisition policy, we intend to see that government uses the land, the land is used for socio-economic development, but there is fairness in utilization of land. That's why you see we are going in to secure people's land through issuing land titles which are owned by individuals, owned by clans, so that everybody benefits from their land, but also use it productively for the economic development of our country.
Thank you indeed. I apologize, sounds like I'm putting you under pressure, but time is up.
It's okay.
And thanks indeed, Mrs. Dorcas Kalani, Mr. Oput, Richard, apologies on that, and Harriet Mbabazi for being on this panel. You've been resplendent. Thank you indeed. Hope to see you sometime soon.
Thank you.
And thanks our viewers for keeping with us. And please, if you're out there and you're an agency, you're a government entity, or you're a corporate firm, please come talk to us and we have a very comprehensive discussion about the issues that concern this city, this nation, and of course this world. Thanks to my production team, to the people in the control room, our sales team, and the entire management here. Please keep locked on to NTV. I'm Kaga Baldwins. Good evening.
Turning on your world.
The Timeline is brought to you by
MTN, everywhere you go.